a fake emergency text, a taxi app tracking feature, and the most brilliant trap my friend ever suggested for catching a cheating spouse. Sometimes, the truth comes running into your open arms faster than you'd expect. This story happened to me exactly 1 year ago. And now that I've had time to process everything and organize all the events in chronological order, I'm ready to share this original tale of betrayal with you. I met Stephanie when I was 27 and she was 23. She worked as a manager at a real estate agency downtown. Picture this: vibrant red hair, an attractive face, and an incredibly high level of social skills. Stephanie seemed like she could find common ground with literally anyone, even the devil himself. In her profession as a realtor, this quality helped her tremendously. As it turned out later, her gift for conversation often helped her in ways that went far beyond work, but we'll get to that. We started dating and got married pretty quickly. She was originally from a smaller town about 1 hour away from our city, while I had lived, grown up, and worked here my entire life. I should mention that the news of our wedding shocked my friends Stephanie and I. Had only been dating for a couple of months at that point. But here's the thing. When I talked with her, I felt like we'd known each other for half our lives. I mistakenly interpreted this feeling as true love. After the wedding, she moved in with me. We weren't thinking about kids yet, and as I understand now, thank God for that. Stephanie loved big social gatherings. She had tons of friends, and apparently during her college years, she'd had plenty of time to get acquainted with everyone, so to speak. Now, I'll get to the heart of my story. The starting point for our separation and eventual divorce was one particular Friday evening. It was November. I remember this clearly because I hadn't switched from summer tires to winter tires on my car yet. We'd had an unusually long, warm spell that year with very little snow, and I'd been driving very little that particular November anyway. It turned out that one of Stephanie's friends from her hometown was visiting our city with her boyfriend. The plan was for my wife to meet her at a cafe that evening. I gave her my blessing and was privately relieved that this time they weren't dragging me along. The topics her girlfriends discussed didn't particularly interest me, and at these meetups when I was forced to come along and meet her friends, I usually felt like a fifth wheel within about 30 minutes. It was Friday evening. My car was parked in our driveway without winter tires, and tomorrow was Saturday. I'd probably sleep in anyway. "Just call me if you need something," my wife told me. "I might not be able to pick you up since the car doesn't have winter tires, and the roads are icy. It rained all day instead of snowing. Then the temperature dropped and everything turned to ice. It's not safe to drive right now, so I'll just get you taxi," I replied to her. I expected her to give me some attitude about this, something like, "Typical, as usual," but no. She just said, "Okay." Stephanie gave me the address of the cafe, and I used the ride-sharing app on my phone to call her a car. She got ready, kissed me on the cheek, and left. I was about to head to the kitchen to get my dinner from the refrigerator, and while I was in the kitchen, I decided to watch some videos on my phone. I unlocked my phone, and the taxi app was still open from when I'd called Stephanie's ride. I was about to close it when I suddenly noticed that the car was driving on a completely different route than the one I'd entered. You probably know that in some ride-sharing apps, you can track on a map exactly where your requested car is going in real time. That's exactly what I was seeing. This should have been my moment to get suspicious, but I didn't think much of it. Maybe she needed to pick up her friend first, or stop for flowers, or any of a 1,000 other reasons to go somewhere else before heading to her original destination. The car reached an address I didn't recognize, and the ride showed as completed. Just to be safe, I memorized the street and house number. That evening passed without incident. Stephanie came home pretty late, and the whole situation was forgotten. A couple of weeks went by, and Stephanie and I got into an argument over something trivial. I can't even remember what it was about now, and it doesn't really matter anyway. The point is, it was a meaningless argument that didn't last very long. Stephanie was standing her ground, I was standing mine, and suddenly she announced that everything was clear to her and she didn't want to see me for at least a couple of days. Hold on, I thought. What kind of hint is this? I live in my own apartment, and I'm not going anywhere. But it turned out to be even more interesting. Stephanie wasn't hinting that I should leave. She calmly packed a small backpack, grabbed her essential personal items, and quickly slammed the door behind her. I calmed down, though I can't say I was particularly upset at that point. I closed the closet she'd left open and started thinking, judge for yourself. She left way too quickly and easily. First, our argument wasn't serious enough to warrant packing up and leaving. Second, and this is the main point, it means she had somewhere to go. I started weighing all the pros and cons, and I couldn't make sense of the idea that she'd gone to stay with a girlfriend. After all, Stephanie had to work the next morning. She wasn't going to drive to her parents in the neighboring city. Stephanie doesn't have a car. She couldn't go live in her office for a week either. There's nowhere there to sit properly, let alone live or sleep. Of course, you could say she just went to a girlfriend's place, but that seemed impossible to me. Let's say if I decided to show up unannounced at a friend's place, no problem. I'd call ahead and could move in pretty quickly. I have plenty of single friends with their own apartments. If we were talking about me or my male friends, I wouldn't be surprised by this kind of development. But girls, it seems to me, operate differently. At least, I've never seen one girl lend another her vehicle for, say, a month, or for one to just show up unannounced like that. Besides, for this to work, that girlfriend would need to be without a family. You can't just show up at a family's house like that. And this friend would also need to have her own place. You can't just show up at someone's place without even calling first. What kind of 23-year-old girlfriend does my wife have who's single, childless, and has her own apartment? And yet my wife had been completely confident that she'd have somewhere to sleep and that she'd definitely be welcomed there. The girlfriend version just didn't add up in my head, but the version involving a male friend fit perfectly into the picture I was seeing. However, while I was reasoning through all of this, I heard the front door open. Stephanie had returned less than 1 hour and a half had passed. At first, she stayed quiet, but after 1 hour, she started trying to make up with me. I pretended everything was normal, but her casual attitude about leaving over such a minor issue really stuck with me, and as it soon turned out, for good reason. We made up in the traditional way that all young couples do. Stephanie went to take a shower. While she was in there for about 30 minutes, I grabbed her phone. It was locked. Fine, I'll make her unlock it when she comes out, I thought. That's exactly what happened. I asked her for her phone and she gave it to me without any problems. Because everything was clean. I didn't see any suspicious calls. I mean, any unfamiliar numbers. She had thousands of contacts that she used for work. But in her calls and messages, I didn't find anything incriminating. But the taxi app was still there. I looked at it and saw that 3 hours earlier, she'd taken another ride to that same address I'd seen a couple of weeks ago. So now I had two options. Either her girlfriend really does live there, or this is the address of the person who's been cheating with my wife. Asking Stephanie directly would be pointless. We just made up, and I wasn't going to hear any confessions, even emotional ones right now. I started trying to remember if there had been any other signs of infidelity, but I couldn't recall anything. Stephanie hadn't become colder toward me, and there didn't seem to be any issues with intimacy either. However, the solution to everything came to me through a stroke of luck. She decided to meet with her girlfriends again after work in mid-December. It was Constitution Day, and since there were many lawyers at her workplace, she said I should expect her home late that evening. Fine. I came home from work that evening and decided to double-check my heart wasn't in the right place. I knew which colleagues she was hanging out with, but I didn't have their phone numbers. Where could I get them? While I was thinking about this, I realized I didn't need them. I went to my wife's social media profile and found one of her lawyer colleagues in her friends list. I messaged her, wished her a happy holiday, and asked if she was planning to celebrate and how. As I expected, nobody at their office was celebrating Constitution Day. They'd finished work and all gone home. So where was my wife then? Time to make a phone call. I dialed Stephanie's number. She didn't answer at first, then sent a message saying it was very noisy where she was and asked me to text instead. I politely asked how the celebration was going and mentioned that the specific coworker I'd just talked to on social media seemed like the life of the party. Stephanie gave some vague one-word response and didn't say anything concrete about any celebration. So I called my friend and asked for advice. What he suggested is something both Stephanie and I will remember for the rest of our lives. So you think she's at that address? My friend asked me. Where else would she be? Her colleagues are home sleeping and haven't heard anything about any Constitution Day celebration. I called Stephanie, and she's lying about some corporate party, but all I have is this address and nothing else. Here's what we did. My friend and I drove to that same building where my wife had been going repeatedly. But how do you find an apartment even if you know she's in this building? We stood in the cold by the entrance, and based on the numbers above the door frames, there were 50 apartments in the building. My friend suggested the solution: you're not going to knock on every apartment door, especially since if your wife is there, they're not going to open the door for you. You're not going to sit in the car until morning either. Let's call and say there's a fire and let her come running to the house immediately. If nobody comes out of the building in 5 minutes, then she's not here. You'll call back and say the firefighters made a mistake, it's not your building, and that's it. As much as I resisted this crazy idea, we couldn't come up with anything better. I texted my wife what my friend had suggested, and within 3 minutes, both my wife and her so-called girlfriend came running out of the building. The girlfriend turned out to be quite male. Stephanie was wearing a fur coat thrown over a blouse, and the guy was in a jacket thrown over a white shirt. They ran toward his car, but on the way they encountered me and my friend. What a meeting! Stephanie definitely wasn't expecting to see us there. "How's it going?" my friend called out toward my wife. But the main thing was that 1 hour later, I was dragging my wife's belongings down to the building entrance from our apartment, and I thanked fate that I'd learned this life lesson relatively cheaply and without lasting consequences. As it turned out, Stephanie's socialization skills were definitely an 11 out of 10. She spent some more time texting me about how this was nothing serious, just an acquaintance, and that with all her heart and soul, she loved only me. The beauty of this discovery wasn't just that I caught Stephanie in a lie, it was how completely unprepared she was for the situation. The fire emergency text worked because it triggered an immediate, instinctive response. She didn't have time to think about whether the emergency was real or to consider that it might be a trap. Looking back, I can see all the signs I should have noticed earlier. The mysterious taxi rides to the same address. The way she packed up and left so quickly during our argument, completely confident she had somewhere to go. The locked phone that had never been locked before. the ease with which she lied about work celebrations that weren't happening. But what really struck me was how elaborate her deception had become. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment affair. This was a carefully orchestrated double life. She'd created fictional work events to cover her absences. She'd trained herself to lie smoothly about where she was and who she was with. She'd even arranged backup stories about girlfriends and celebrations. The fire text trick worked because it bypassed all of her carefully constructed lies and forced an authentic reaction. When people think there's a genuine emergency, they don't have time to maintain their fictional stories. They just react. My friend's suggestion was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to gather more evidence or catch Stephanie in smaller lies, we created a situation where the truth had to reveal itself immediately. The fake emergency forced her to choose between maintaining her cover story and responding to what she believed was a crisis. Within 3 minutes, everything I needed to know came running out of that apartment building. The guy she was with seemed as surprised as Stephanie was. He clearly hadn't expected to meet her husband in the street while running to what he thought was a fire emergency. The whole situation was so surreal that nobody knew how to react. What bothered me most wasn't just the betrayal itself, it was how confidently Stephanie had been living this double life. She'd become comfortable lying to me about her whereabouts, creating fictional social events, and maintaining relationships I knew nothing about. The Constitution Day lie was particularly brazen. She'd used her workplace and colleagues as cover, knowing I couldn't easily verify her story. If I hadn't thought to check social media with her coworkers, I might never have discovered that her entire evening was fabricated. Stephanie's reaction when confronted was also telling. Instead of coming clean or showing remorse, she tried to minimize the situation. She called this other man just a friend, and insisted she loved only me. But people don't run out of buildings during fire emergencies with just acquaintances while wearing hastily thrown-on clothes. The aftermath was swift. I realized that someone who could lie so extensively and so convincingly wasn't someone I could trust with my future. If she could deceive me about her whereabouts, her activities, and her relationships, what else had she been lying about? Moving her belongings out was almost anticlimactic after such a dramatic discovery. But I was grateful that I'd learned the truth before we'd had children or become more financially entangled. Some life lessons are expensive. This one was relatively cheap, considering what it could have cost me later. The fire text technique is something I'll never forget. Not because I plan to use it again, but because it taught me something important about human nature. When people are living double lives, they become very good at maintaining their lies during normal circumstances. But genuine emergencies strip away all the careful planning and reveal the truth. That's how one fake fire text ripped the mask off my marriage. If you've ever caught betrayal because of one clever trick, share it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've got a story of your own, raw, real, about the lies people tell, send it to me. My contact's in the description. Because the next story, let's just say it makes this one look almost ordinary.